The morning sun painted the sky orange as Jeho walked to his fruit stand. He was 70 years old now, and his back hurt a little, but he smiled anyway. For 30 years, he had sold fruit in this market in Harare. The market was his second home. Jeho reached into his pocket and pulled out his old brass keys. The lock on his stand was rusty, but it still worked well. As he opened the wooden doors, the fresh smell of fruit filled the air. He had stored mangoes, oranges, and bananas inside the night before. Another beautiful morning, he said to himself. He began his daily routine of setting up the fruit. First the oranges, then the mangoes, and finally the sweet bananas. He arranged them carefully in neat rows. The fruit made beautiful patterns of yellow, orange, and green. The market was quiet at this early hour. Only the birds were awake, singing their morning songs. Jeho liked this peaceful time. It reminded him of his childhood home in Korea, where his father had also been a merchant. Some things were the same everywhere. The quiet of early morning, the joy of setting up a shop, the happiness of greeting the first customer. As he worked, Jeho thought about how different his life was now from when he first came to Harare. Back then, he barely spoke English or Shona. He had been scared and lonely. But the other market vendors had been kind to him. They helped him learn their languages and customs. Now, after so many years, he could speak to everyone, and the market felt like family. Jeho looked at his watch. It was almost 6 o'clock. Soon, other vendors would arrive. He could already hear footsteps approaching. It would be Hanul, the young woman who had recently moved from Korea. She always came early to set up her vegetable stand next to his. "Good morning, Uncle Jeho," Hanul called out cheerfully. She was 23 and full of energy. She reminded Jeho of himself when he was young. "Good morning, Hanul," he answered with a warm smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you. The morning is so peaceful here," she said, starting to unpack her vegetables. In Seoul, everything was always noisy and busy, but here I can hear myself think. Jeho nodded. He understood what she meant. That was one of the reasons he had stayed in Harare all these years. The city had its own rhythm, slower and gentler than the big cities in Korea. As the sun rose higher, more vendors arrived. The quiet of dawn slowly changed into the gentle sounds of the market waking up. Jeho heard the soft sweep of brooms as people cleaned their spaces. He smelled fresh bread from the bakery down the row. Someone started playing quiet music from a small radio. Jeho finished arranging his fruit just as his first customer arrived. It was Mrs. Moyo, who had been buying fruit from him for 20 years. "Ah, Jeho, your mangoes look perfect today," she said, picking up one to smell it. "I saved the best ones for you," he told her. This was true. He always did. As he wrapped Mrs. Moyo's mangoes in paper, Jeho felt content. This was why he loved the morning market. It wasn't just about selling fruit. It was about the connections he had made, the peaceful moments he shared with others, and the feeling of belonging to this special place. The morning light now filled the whole market. Another day had begun at the Harare market, and Jeho was grateful to be part of it. He looked forward to the quiet hours ahead, filled with friendly faces and gentle conversations. This was his life now, and it was good. Hanul carefully arranged her vegetables in neat rows. The morning sun made the lettuce leaves shine with tiny drops of water. She had been in Harare for only 3 months, but she already loved her spot next to Jeho's fruit stand. She watched as Jeho helped Mrs. Moyo pick mangoes. The old merchant knew exactly how to choose the ripest fruit. Hanul hoped that one day she would understand her vegetables just as well. There was so much to learn. "Hanul," Jeho called after Mrs. Moyo left. "Would you like some tea? The morning is a bit cool today." "Yes, please," she answered. Jeho always brought extra tea in a blue thermos. It was one of the many kind things he did to help her feel welcome. As they drank their tea, more customers began arriving at the market. Haynul enjoyed watching the different people who came to shop. There were mothers with small children, business people hurrying to buy breakfast before work, and elderly couples who took their time looking at everything. A young boy stopped at her stand and pointed at the carrots. "How much?" he asked shyly. Haynul smiled and told him the price. She was proud that she could now count money in both Korean won and Zimbabwean dollars. When she first arrived, she had made many mistakes with the money, but her customers had been patient with her. "Your vegetables look very fresh today," said a voice behind her. It was Subin, the spice merchant, coming to buy her daily vegetables. "The tomatoes are especially nice." "Thank you," Haynul replied. "I picked them very early this morning from my small garden." She had started the garden behind her house, just like her grandmother had taught her in Korea. Some things work differently in African soil, but the basic principles were the same. As Subin selected her vegetables, she shared news about the market. "Du-yeon is teaching a tea ceremony today," she said. "You should come watch when you have time. It's beautiful to see." Haynul nodded eagerly. She had heard about Du-yeon's tea ceremonies, but hadn't seen one yet. The older woman mixed Korean and Zimbabwean tea traditions in a special way that everyone talked about. The morning grew warmer, and more people filled the market. Haynul liked the busy times just as much as the quiet early hours. There was something peaceful about the steady flow of customers, the quiet conversations, and the routine of weighing vegetables and counting change. Jaiho sometimes gave her advice about running her stand. "Remember to turn the cucumbers each day," he would say, "or keep some vegetables in the shade." Simple things, but important. Haynul wrote everything down in a small notebook she kept in her pocket. Around mid-morning, Kita walked past, carrying his usual bag of stories. The old man told stories to children in the market, mixing Korean folktales with African ones. Some children were already following him, waiting for today's story. "Would you like to hear a story later?" Kita asked Haynul. "Today's tale is about why the sun rises in the east. It's a story my grandfather told me, but with some African wisdom mixed in." "I would like that very much," Haynul said. She enjoyed how Kita kept their Korean traditions alive while embracing their new home. As the morning continued, Haynul felt more and more at home in the market. The sounds of gentle bargaining, the smell of Subin's spices, the sight of Jaiho's carefully arranged fruit, and the happy faces of customers all made her feel that she had found her place. She looked at her vegetable stand with pride. It wasn't as big as some others, but it was hers. Each day she learned something new, and each day she felt more connected to this community that had welcomed her so warmly. Subin opened her spice containers one by one. Each jar released a different scent into the morning air. She had been selling spices in the Harare market for 15 years, and she knew exactly how to arrange them to attract customers. The morning sun warmed her stall as she began grinding fresh spices. The sound of her mortar and pestle made a gentle rhythm. Without thinking about it, she started humming an old Korean lullaby her mother used to sing. The peaceful tune matched the quiet sounds of the market. "That's a beautiful song," said a customer who stopped to look at her spices. Subin smiled and measured out some cinnamon powder. She enjoyed sharing little pieces of her culture with her customers. From her stall, she could see Jaiho selling fruit and Haynul arranging vegetables. The sight made her happy. When she first came to Harare, Jaiho had helped her learn about running a market stall. Now she watched him do the same for Haynul. The smell of her spices began to spread through the market. Cinnamon, cardamom, and local African herbs mixed together in the air. Some people stopped just to enjoy the smell. Others came to buy her special spice mixes that combined Korean and African flavors. "Subin, do you have more of that tea spice mix?" Du-yeon called from her tea shop across the way. "I need it for today's ceremony." "Yes, I made it fresh this morning," Subin answered. She had prepared the mix especially for Du-yeon's tea ceremony. It was a blend of ginger, cinnamon, and local herbs that made the tea taste like both Korea and Zimbabwe. As she walked the spices over to Du Yen's shop, Su Bin saw Kita setting up his storytelling corner. Children were already gathering around him, sitting on colorful mats. The old storyteller caught her eye and waved. Back at her stall, Su Bin began mixing more spices. She had learned many things about local herbs since coming to Harare. The other vendors had taught her which plants worked well together. In return, she had shared her knowledge of Korean spices. A group of women stopped at her stall. They were regular customers who cooked for large families. Su Bin knew exactly what they needed before they asked. As she measured out their spices, she gave them advice about using different combinations. "Add this one slowly," she explained, holding up a jar of bright red powder. "It's very strong." The women nodded, trusting her knowledge. Over the years, they had become more than customers. They were friends who shared recipes and cooking tips. The morning grew warmer, and more people filled the market. Su Bin kept grinding spices, letting the steady motion calm her mind. The sound mixed with the quiet talk of customers, the distant voice of Kita telling stories, and the gentle music someone was playing. Narration, who owned the largest stall in the market, walked past with her morning tea. "Your spices smell wonderful today," she said, stopping to chat. "Will you join us for lunch later? I'm making a special dish." "Of course," Su Bin replied. She looked forward to these shared meals. They reminded her of family dinners in Korea, but with new flavors and friends. As she worked, Su Bin thought about how the market had become her home. Each spice in her collection told a story. Some came from her homeland, others from her new country. Together, they made something special, just like the market itself. The morning continued peacefully. Su Bin ground more spices, served more customers, and hummed more songs. Around her, the market moved in its gentle rhythm, a place where different cultures came together as naturally as the spices in her jars. Du Yan prepared her tea shop with great care that morning. She placed her finest cups on clean bamboo mats and arranged her teapots in a perfect line. The morning light came through her shop's windows, making the ceramic pots shine. She had learned the art of tea ceremonies in Korea 30 years ago. Now, in her small corner of the Harare market, she performed these ceremonies with both Korean and Zimbabwean teas. People came from all parts of the city to watch and participate. The water in her copper kettle started to steam. Du Yan smiled as she heard the first quiet bubbles. The sound reminded her of rainfall. She had 5 different teas ready for today's ceremony. 2 from Korea, 2 from Zimbabwe, and 1 special blend she had created herself. "May I come in?" asked a quiet voice. It was Mrs. Moyo, her first guest of the day. The elderly woman had become a regular at Du Yan's morning ceremonies. She sat down carefully on one of the cushions placed around the low table. "The morning tea is almost ready," Du Yan said softly. She picked up her favorite teapot, the one her grandmother had given her. The blue and white patterns on it told stories of mountains and rivers. More guests arrived and took their places. There was Mr. Chen from the bookshop, Hey Newell from the vegetable stand, and 3 local teachers who came every week. They all sat quietly, letting the peaceful atmosphere of the tea shop wash over them. Du Yan began the ceremony. First, she warmed the cups with hot water. Steam rose from each cup like morning mist. Then she measured the tea leaves carefully. Today she would start with a special green tea from Korea. "Watch how the leaves dance in the water," she told her guests. The dried leaves opened slowly as she poured the hot water over them. The room filled with a gentle, sweet smell. Everyone stayed quiet as Du Yan served the tea. This silence was part of the ceremony too. It let people focus on the simple beauty of pouring tea, the quiet sound of cups being passed, and the first careful sip of the hot drink. "This tea reminds me of spring mornings," Mrs. Moyo said after her first taste. The others nodded in agreement. Du Yan smiled, pleased that they could taste what she had tried to share. After the Korean tea, Du Yan prepared a local Zimbabwean herb tea. She had learned about these herbs from the market's older vendors. The mix of familiar and new flavors made her ceremony special. Through her shop's window, she could see the market getting busier. But inside, time seemed to move more slowly. The sound of Kita telling stories to children mixed with the quiet bubble of her kettle. Each cup of tea is different, Du Yan explained as she poured the herb tea. Just like each day in the market is different. Her guests watched the dark red liquid fill their cups. The morning sun made it glow like amber. Subin spices drifted in from outside, adding to the peaceful atmosphere. Du Yan had learned that a good tea ceremony used all the senses. The smell of spices, the sound of pouring water, the sight of steam rising, the warmth of the cup, and finally, the taste of the tea itself. The ceremony continued through the morning. People came and went quietly, each taking a moment of peace with them. Du Yan kept pouring tea, sharing stories, and creating a space where everyone could feel at home. Kita sat on his wooden stool in the corner of the market. Around him, children gathered on colorful mats spread out in a half-circle. The morning sun made warm patches of light on the ground, perfect for storytelling. Today's story, Kita said in his gentle voice, is about why the sun rises in the east. He opened his old leather bag and took out a small drum. The drum had been with him since he left Korea 25 years ago. The children sat quietly, waiting. Some were from Korean families, others from local families, but all of them loved Kita's stories. He began to tap the drum softly, creating a quiet rhythm that matched his words. Long ago, he began, the sun was confused about which way to travel across the sky. His voice was calm and clear. Even adults passing by slowed down to listen. The sound carried through the market like a peaceful stream. Keita looked at the children's faces as he told the story. He mixed elements from Korean folklore with African wisdom, creating something new and special. When he spoke about the sun meeting an old elephant who gave directions, the children smiled. When he described how a clever monkey helped the sun find its path, they leaned forward eagerly. The monkey said to the sun, Kita continued, playing his drum softly, "Follow the morning star. It will show you the way." He paused to let the words sink in. Through the market sounds, Du Yan's tea ceremony chimes rang gently, adding to the story's atmosphere. Some of the market vendors watched from their stalls. Jiho arranged his fruit more slowly so he could hear the tale. Haenul paused while weighing vegetables, drawn in by the story. Even Subin stopped grinding her spices to listen. Kita's stories always had messages about friendship and understanding. As he told how the sun learned to rise in the east, he included lessons about listening to others and respecting different ways of thinking. And that is why, he said, tapping his drum one last time, the sun always starts its journey in the east, where Korea and many other lands begin their day. The children clapped quietly, respecting the peaceful mood of the market. One small girl raised her hand. "Mr. Kita, do you have stories from when you were little?" she asked. Kita smiled and nodded. He remembered sitting just like these children, listening to his grandfather's tales in a small village in Korea. "Every story I tell has a piece of my childhood in it," he explained. "But now they also have pieces of my life here in Harare. Stories grow and change, just like people do." The morning continued, and Kita told more stories. Each one mixed different traditions together, like Subin's spice blends or Du Yan's tea ceremonies. The children came and went, but there was always someone stopping to listen. Between stories, Hite taught the children simple Korean and Shona words. They learned to say thank you and hello in both languages. The words became part of their own stories, which they would later share with their families. The sun rose higher in the sky, just as it had in Kita's story. The market's peaceful sounds made a perfect background for his tales. All around him, life in the market continued its gentle flow, creating new stories every day. The afternoon sun made the market warm. Yunji sat in her craft stall, where cool shadows provided comfort from the heat. Her hands moved carefully as she folded a sheet of colorful paper, The paper was special, brought from Korea, and she treated each piece with care. People often came to her stall to watch her work. Today, a small group stood quietly as she turned the paper into the shape of a crane. Her movements were slow and precise. Each fold had to be perfect. The paper remembers every fold, she explained to the watchers. So we must fold with care and patience. She had learned paper folding from her mother, who had learned it from her mother before her. Now she shared this art with people in Harare. A young girl pointed to a display of finished pieces on Yunji's shelf. There were paper cranes, flowers, and animals of all colors. Some were made with Korean paper, others with local materials. Yunji had learned to use whatever she could find to keep her art alive. "Would you like to learn?" Yunji asked the girl. She took out a fresh sheet of paper and placed it on her wooden work table. The girl nodded and stepped closer. Other people gathered around to watch the lesson. Yunji taught the basic folds first. "See how the paper wants to bend here," she said, showing the girl how to make clean, sharp creases. The afternoon light made patterns on the paper as they worked together. From her stall, she could hear Kita finishing his last story of the day. The sound of his drum mixed with the quiet instructions she gave. Du Yen's tea ceremonies were ending too, and the smell of the last tea of the day drifted through the air. "Each fold is like a small story," Yunji said as she helped the girl. "When we finish, all the folds come together to make something beautiful." She remembered saying these same words to her own daughter, who now studied art in Seoul. More children came to watch and learn. Yunji gave each one a piece of paper. Soon her stall was full of quiet concentration as small hands tried to copy her movements. Some made mistakes, but she showed them how to start again. The afternoon grew later, and the market became quieter. This was Yunji's favorite time. The busy morning rush was over, and people moved more slowly. It was the perfect time for teaching her peaceful art. Myre stopped by with cold drinks for everyone. "Your stall is always so peaceful, Yunji," she said, watching the children work. "It reminds me of my grandmother's house." Yunji smiled and continued folding. She had made her stall into a quiet place where people could learn and rest. The colorful papers and finished pieces hanging from strings made it feel like a small art gallery. As the sun began to move lower in the sky, Yunji helped the children finish their pieces. Each one left with something they had made themselves. Their proud smiles reminded her of why she loved teaching her art. "Tomorrow we can make butterflies," she told them as they carefully carried their paper creations home. The children nodded happily, already looking forward to another peaceful afternoon at Yunji's stall. The day's heat began to fade, and a cool breeze moved through the market. Yunji looked at her shelf of paper art, each piece catching the late afternoon light. In this quiet corner of the market, she had found a way to share her culture and bring joy to others. Dark clouds gathered over the market in the late afternoon. Myre looked up at the sky and smiled. She had been in Harare long enough to know when rain was coming. Her large awning, the biggest in the market, would soon become a shelter for everyone. The first drops fell softly. They made quiet sounds on the metal roofs of the stalls. Myre watched as people began moving toward her covered area. She had set up benches and chairs earlier, knowing the rain would bring visitors. "Come, come," she called to Huinul, who was trying to protect her vegetables. "Bring what you need under here." Myre's voice was warm and kind, like a mother calling her children inside from the rain. Soon, many of the market people gathered under her awning. Jiho brought some of his fruit. Subin came with her spices. Du Yun carried her teapots, and Yunji brought her paper crafts. The rain made everyone move closer together, but nobody minded. "We should make tea," Du Yun suggested. She set up her smallest teapot on a table. The sound of rain hitting the awning made perfect background music for another small tea ceremony. Myre looked at the group with happiness. When she first built this big awning, some people thought it was too large. But she had said, "We need a place where everyone can gather." Now, on rainy days like this, people understood why. The rain grew stronger. but everyone under the awning stayed dry. Customers joined the vendors, creating a peaceful afternoon gathering. Kita started telling a quiet story about rain in Korea, and children sat on mats to listen. In Korea, spring rain was different. Mayre said to a young customer, "But this rain, it has its own beauty." She remembered her first rainy season in Harare, how strange and wonderful it had felt. Now these afternoon rains felt like home. Subin opened her spice jars, letting the sweet smells mix with the fresh scent of rain. The warm spices made the air under the awning feel cozy. Someone started humming a song, and others joined in softly. Hanul arranged her vegetables on one of Mireille's tables. "The rain makes everything feel clean and new," she said. The older vendors nodded. They had all learned to see rain as a blessing, a time when the market became like one big family. Mayre walked among her guests, making sure everyone had a place to sit. She had been in the market longer than most of the other Korean vendors. They called her the market mother because she always took care of everyone. The rain continued to fall, but nobody was in a hurry to leave. Yunji taught a few people how to make paper boats, which made everyone laugh. Du Yun poured more tea. Ji-ho shared his sweetest oranges. This is what market life should be, Mayre thought to herself. She watched as Korean and Zimbabwean customers talked and shared food. The rain had brought them together, but it was the feeling of community that made them stay. As the afternoon went on, the rain became softer. Light came through the clouds, making the raindrops shine. But the people under Mayre's awning stayed a little longer, enjoying the peaceful moment they had created together. The evening light turned golden as the market day drew to its end. After the rain, everything looked clean and fresh. The wet streets reflected the sunset, making the market glow with warm colors. Ji-ho began his closing routine, carefully packing away his remaining fruit. Hanul helped him, having already finished with her vegetable stand. They worked together quietly, master and apprentice, sharing the peaceful end of the day. "Let's have our evening meal together," Mayre called to everyone. She had set up a long table under her awning. The wood was still dry from the afternoon rain. Steam rose from bowls of food she had prepared earlier. One by one, the vendors finished their work and joined the table. Subin brought her special evening tea blend, which Du Yan prepared in her finest teapot. The smell of spices and tea mixed with the fresh after-rain air. "Today was a good day," Kita said, sitting down next to Yunji, who was putting away her last paper cranes. The children had gone home, but their paper creations decorated the market stalls like colorful memories of the day. The vendors shared a simple but delicious meal. There was kimchi that Mayre had made, fresh vegetables from Haenul's garden, and sadza, the local staple food they had all grown to love. The combination of Korean and Zimbabwean dishes seemed natural now. "When I first came here," Ji-ho said as he passed a bowl of soup, "I never thought I would find another home." The others nodded. Each of them had similar stories of coming to Harare, feeling lost at first, but then finding their place in this market. The sunset painted the sky in beautiful colors. Some late customers stopped to admire the scene. They saw the Korean vendors sharing their evening meal, heard their quiet conversations mixing Korean and English words, and felt the peaceful atmosphere. Du Yan poured the last of the tea into everyone's cups. "To another blessed day," she said softly. They all raised their cups in a gentle toast. The tea steam rose into the cooling evening air. Hanul looked around the table at her new family. 3 months ago, she had been nervous about moving to Harare. Now she couldn't imagine being anywhere else. The market had welcomed her, just as it had welcomed all of them. As they finished their meal, the vendors began their final tasks of the day. They closed their stalls slowly, taking care with each detail. The market sounds grew quieter, like a song slowly ending. Mayre stood at her table, watching as her friends gathered their belongings. She remembered all the evenings like this one, years of shared meals and quiet conversations. The market had changed over time, but its heart stayed the same. "See you tomorrow morning," Jaiho said as he locked his fruit stand. The others echoed his words, each heading home in different directions. Their footsteps made soft sounds on the wet ground. The last light of day faded from the sky. The market settled into nighttime silence, waiting for another dawn. Tomorrow would bring new stories, new lessons, and new moments of peace in this special place where two cultures had become one family.